Thank you, Tori. Well, I'm just delighted to be here this morning with you for the year's first Leader Lens. This is a recasting of our Ask Gleaves seminars from previous years. And I think when we got Gleaves out of the title, it got popular. Because this is the most number of people we've had at this, so I'm just delighted that you're here this morning. I've been asked to say something about international leadership. But you know what? I'm going to just talk very briefly about international leadership. We'll have a very brief interactive exercise about international leadership, because what I really want to do with you this morning is focus on the key to international leadership, or indeed any leadership, and that is asking you to go a little bit within to know yourself better so that you know who you are, whether you're in America or abroad. Okay? So that's the plan this morning. There have been many surveys of managers and leaders internationally. Some 72 surveys over 60 countries dealing with more than 70,000 managers and people in leadership positions in these many countries have been surveyed and asked the question, what traits, what qualities do you look for in a leader? And I was curious, what do you think internationally, if you redact all of those studies, dozens of studies, you redact them. Let me ask you this big, broad question. Do you think that leadership traits are cross-cultural and appreciated? Does anybody think that there are differences? Okay, you're nodding your heads. Absolutely. There are universals that are appreciated, and there are significant differences. And with the help of Jack Hyatt, I have a handout for you a little bit later about some of those differences. What do you think some of the universals are internationally? What are the traits that people look for? Universal, wherever you are in the world, whatever culture you're in. What do you think they are?
Integrity.
Integrity, and that is true. Can you be more specific? What specifically is integrity? Honesty. Good. What else?
Follow through.
Follow through. These are very important. Anything else?
Ethics.
Yeah, to be, have an ethical core. I know it's the last interview I had with Gerald R. Ford in his home in Beaver Creek, Colorado. And I asked him, I said, Mr. President, of all the traits that you had that helped you be a president and also to be a 13-term legislator in Congress, what was if you boiled it down to one quality, what's the one quality you needed more than anything else? And he said, trust, the ability to inspire trust. And that goes to these. When Ford walked into a room to negotiate and he said he would do something, he did it. Invariably, he did it. He never went back on his word. And the people who knew they were dealing with an honest man and could go about doing their work with a lot more assurance. So that's very important. Integrity. What's another quality that would be universally appreciated? There are, by the way, 22 of them. So you've got a big menu of choices here.
Charisma.
Jack. Charisma. Yes, I mean that is charisma. What's charisma? It's a new word, actually, based on ancient Greek thought, but it's a new word, relatively speaking.
Being outgoing, friendly.
Charisma. Yes, its components are being outgoing and friendly, but what else does charisma suggest?
Ability to motivate people to achieve the goal.
Brett, ability to
Motivate people to achieve a common goal.
Okay, ability. Okay, it's motivating, friendly. Isn't there a sense?
Magnetic.
Pardon?
Magnetic.
Magnetic. That's what I was looking for. Magnetic. There is a sense in which a person is compellingly attractive. And we know those people when we get into a room with them. Some people just, I think of people like George Washington. Think about this about Washington. Every organization he joined, he was unanimously told that he was the top dog. It didn't matter whether it was with the Continental Congress, the Continental Army, the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the presidency where he won unanimous votes from the electors. In every endeavor Washington undertook, everybody in the room with him knew that he was the man. Now think about that. I mean, I know I don't have that quality. Very few of us have that quality. But that is recognized universally. You can go abroad and you can see who has charisma in a room. It's the way they stand. A lot of people also describe it. This is considered one of those universal traits. Real positive energy. Positive energy is essential. And that's kind of a part of this charisma as well. Let me just read to you some of the others. Again, these are redacted from many different studies.
Please?
Yes.
Charisma by itself can be positive or negative. It's really what the leader does with that.
It's what you do with it.
Matters.
That's exactly right.
Because there have been charismatic leaders that have been terrible for their countries and for the world.
Absolutely. You can think of the Hitlers, the Stalins, the Mussolinis. No question. No question. 22 positive leader attributes are leaders are dependable, they're effective bargainers, they're informed, they're team builders, they're encouraging, they're honest, they're just, they plan ahead, they're dynamic, they're motivational, they're decisive, they're communicative, they are coordinative, they're trustworthy, they have foresight, they're positive, they're confidence builders, they're intelligent. Oh, intelligence is an interesting one. They've done a lot of studies about intelligence. You gotta be for it, right? Everybody wants to be intelligent. Do you know, though, intelligence, which is really, it's our ability to take in information and adapt to reality, to adapt effectively to your environment. That's what they mean by intelligence in the leadership study. You can absorb the information, the cues, the signals, but you adapt. You survive. But here's the thing, the studies show that if you have too much intelligence compared to your followers, and you aren't really effective in communicating, it actually creates a wall of separation. And so really smart people sometimes have real tough time leading. Think Steve Jobs getting fired from Apple. Steve Jobs getting fired from his own company. Okay, he had to relearn some things or learn some things for the first time, but he adapted, he changed. A win-win problem solver, administratively skilled, and excellence-oriented. By the way, these traits, there's a wonderful chapter in this book, Leadership by Northouse, and on page 404 are all these redacted studies in these traits. And I have several copies of this in my office. You're welcome to come to my office and check it out, and borrow it, and copy it, and absorb it. Now there's some universally undesirable leadership attributes. This is something John Wardrop was just alluding to. What do you think a couple of those are? How about using pens that don't write? What's undesirable? Universally, there are 8 of those. Arrogance. Who said arrogance? Deb? What's the line between confidence and arrogance?
I think it's arrogance is more, hey, I'm superior to other people, whereas confidence is, hey, I believe in my own abilities, and I can also believe in yours. Some flavor of that.
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it, actually. Arrogance would be one of them. It's a much shorter list, these traits that are universally, because there are so many cultural differences. It turns out there are 8. What would be another one besides arrogance, where you just disregard people as just things to use, pawns to manipulate to get your way? What would be another universally? So it doesn't matter whether you're in China or Germany, America, Dominican Republic, you don't want to see this in a leader.
For lack of a better term, stifling.
Stifling, overbearing, that kind of maybe goes with arrogance, overbearing, stifling others. Is that one F? I think so.
My experience in international is only in business and negotiating contracts with countries and companies around the world. Having a win-lose negotiating behavior was really frowned on, especially in countries like Japan, for example. So,
Very good. That's absolutely true. You can't go into negotiations with somebody who has that
almost a
attitude.
bully concept in a sense.
Yes, no, that's good. Here they are in brief. A leader who is a loner, irritable. Irritability is universally hated. Ruthlessness, universally hated. Asocial. Non-explicit. Just vague about where we're going, what you're supposed to do. Dictatorial. It's my way or the highway, which is that arrogance, win-lose attitude. Non-cooperative and egocentric. No one in the world wants their leader to be egocentric. And remember, those of you who've heard where I've spoken before, especially about Abraham Lincoln, it's that attitude, I think your mama raises you with an attitude, it's like Abraham Lincoln's mother did. There are two kinds of people that walk in the room. There's the kind of person who walks in the room and says, "Here I am." Whoa. Here I am, and I bet you couldn't wait to see me this morning. There's the other kind of person that walks in the room and says, "There you are, and you, and you, and you, and I can't wait to get to know you." Those are the leaders. Those are the leaders. You instinctively want to follow somebody who has that openness to other people. So those are the positive and the negative leadership traits. But you know what? I think that the most important thing leaders across the board need to know is how to lead themselves first. Before you go out and presume you're going to lead others, you have to know who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And for the rest of my exercise this morning, I'd like to open this up into an interactive exercise. That was just the warm-up act to get you talking a little bit, because now I'm going to really need you to do some talking. Because what I want to do is walk you through an exercise I've been doing for years and years. It's called the Ring of Gyges. It's from Book 2 of Plato's Republic. And if you know Plato, this is about a dialogue. It's always a dialogue format. Plato was a frustrated playwright, it turns out, dramatist. And it's this dialogue between Plato's brother, Glaucon, and Socrates about the nature of justice. But really what it is this ancient story that's going to inspire such stories as as Lord of the Rings, Jekyll and Hyde, and a lot of stories in our whole canon of literature. And it's a universal genre, really. Here's the question: what would you do if you were the most powerful person in the world? Because, as one of our favorite speakers who comes to the Hauenstein Center, Robert Caro, says, he's written 4 books about Lyndon Johnson. Power not only corrupts, power reveals. Power reveals who you are. So Socrates, in this dialogue, very cleverly lays out a scenario meant to reveal who the person is. And why is this important 2,500 years ago? Because Athens was trying to be a democracy. Democracy says, okay, we're all in this together, all for one, one for all. We each get a vote, we each have a voice. Socrates is challenging, though. Have you earned? Yes, legally I know you have your voice, but have you earned the right to try to persuade others of what to do? Are you strong enough inside? Do you have that core of integrity? So here's the story. The Ring of Gyges begins with a shepherd Gyges. He's in an ancient kingdom which is now in Turkey. It's Lydia. And he's a decent man at the beginning of this story. He's married, he has kids, he's honest in all of his dealings with the court, and all of the sheep when they come to inventory them, each spring. He's an honest man. One day there's a terrific earthquake and storm, and Gyges has to get his sheep, or himself certainly, to a safer place. He remembers a cave, so he heads for this cave to get out of the storm. And as he goes into the opening of the cave, he notices that the earthquake has opened up that rock even further, and he goes down, he starts to explore with a brand, a torch, and he discovers a sepulcher with a big stone lid on it. He's curious man. He pries open the lid, and there before him is a cadaver. This is a great Halloween story. With all of these jewels everywhere. Gyges is an honest man, you see. But he sees one ring on a finger of that cadaver. That bony, scrawny little finger, and he thinks, all these jewels, no one would miss it if I just take that one ring. And he does so. Puts the lid back on, the storm's subsided, goes about his business. The next time he's with all the other shepherds outside the palace there in Lydia. Everybody's they've taken inventory, they've reported to the king's accountants. And it's at night, and there's a big bonfire. Gyges figures out all of a sudden that sometimes all the other shepherds are talking about him as though he were not present. And he's saying, oh, wait a second, I'm here. And he realizes that when he turns the ring, he has the ability to become invisible. All of a sudden, he realizes, I am the most powerful man in the world. Because if I am invisible, I can do anything I want. No one can see me. And what's that definition of character you've heard? Character is who you are when no one's looking. Gyges is now that human being. And so he hatches plans. We don't have time for the long version of this, but in brief, this good man decides he has the hots for the queen. Now, any ordinary shepherd who'd have hots for the queen be executed or exiled. That would be the best fate, executed on the spot. But Gyges, you see, knows that because he's invisible, he can get away with being very naughty. So he makes himself invisible, and it doesn't matter where the royal guards are, he just finds his way into the palace. He goes to the queen's bedchamber, and it's a famous story. Anybody see, by the way, The English Patient, the movie The English Patient? Mm-hmm. Remember the character Catherine in the bonfire at the beginning of the movie, and she's reading about Gyges. So it's actually a story that has found its way in our popular culture. So he goes in and he just wants to see the queen's body naked. He said, that's all I want to do. And then I'll be satisfied. Ladies and gentlemen, do you think he was satisfied just seeing her naked? No, not at all. This good man is slowly corrupted more and more and more. I won't get into the details, but you can imagine what happens. Before you know it, Gyges and the queen are hatching a plot to murder the king. And they do. And this is a famous story in the ancient world. Gyges kills the king of Lydia to be with the queen. Remember, this was a good man at the beginning of the story, but he has successively become a thief, an adulterer, and now a regicide. Killed his very own king. Now this is where I ask you to think about your own life. If you were Gyges, if you had the opportunity, if you discovered a ring, and when you put it on and you turn the collet of the ring and it makes you invisible, what would you do? The first time I gave this presentation was over in East Lansing to a lecture hall of 200 political science freshmen at MSU. And I had no idea what would happen. But they were starting to say things like, oh man, we get in Breslin Arena and change the outcome of basketball games. We get out there in Spartan Stadium, and every time Michigan or Ohio State got in there, we would mess with the ball and the outcome and that kind of thing. What would you do? I'm a classroom teacher, and I have a rule of thumb. If you avoid my eye contact, I will call on you. Everybody just walked right on. Come on. This only works if we interact. What would you do? And be real.
Rob a bank.
Who said that? Absolutely. Of course you would rob a bank. Remember the guy in the Twilight Zone? Who had, it's another guy, it's a variation on guy, just he had the stopwatch, and he could hit the stopwatch and time stopped, and so he walks in and he robs the bank, and then as he's pushing all the money out on the cart, the stopwatch falls off and cracks, and then he's stuck, where everybody is just like this, you know? That's right. You would rob a bank, I would too. Yeah.
Go to the movies for free.
Oh, isn't that sweet? You would go to the movies for free. Okay, very good.
Control the election.
You would throw the election. Absolutely, you would throw the election. You would rob banks. What else would you do?
Yes. This is what my enemies were saying?
Yes, this is what Gaiji's got to do with the shepherds when they thought he wasn't there. And then, my good friend Michael Knassen, after you heard somebody say something really nasty about you, and you were invisible, what would you do?
I'll kill him.
There you go. That's the point. Oh, you're a good... You know, some audiences are so funny. It takes me a half hour to get somebody to say something, you know, that's stronger than going to the movies for free. I'll just jump right in.
Sorry about that.
No, this is good. Well, obviously the point of this exercise is as people get more real and they talk about who they really are, it's kind of like, what would you do if you won the lottery question? I mean, I'm not talking about, 30 million. That's just petty cash. I'm talking about if you win like $500 million or something, you could get a check for that large. And all of a sudden, you wouldn't put up with stuff at work. You wouldn't put up with stuff. You'd start manipulating people around you. Right? Isn't this who we are? Now, let me ask you a question. Anybody in here going to play the goody two-shoes card with us? Say, oh, no, I would throw the ring away, or I wouldn't be that way. Anybody in here think you're that good? Our murderer is now he's totally repentant. Okay. No, seriously, Michael. Talk to me.
Yeah, I would hope I would. And I guess it's hard to say until you're in that situation, but yeah, I don't think I would actually kill anyone or do evil.
So you would not be corrupted?
I don't think so.
Were the 55 framers of the Constitution then wrong to worry about power corrupts? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Were they wrong? Is their premise nonsense?
I think some people would definitely kill people.
But you wouldn't.
I don't think so, no.
What is in you that would keep you from being corrupted? Just words on a board.
I believe that good exists and that it should be, promoted and spread, and I believe that for its own sake, not just for what I get from it. But
that's what we believe. That's what we want our best selves to be. Do we fail?
yeah.
Might we slip? Chris.
It's not quite all the way on the good side, but I think that the worry that I would have is after I take advantage of it and make myself rich and powerful and famous, whatever I want, I would worry that if I lose it, the repercussions because I've made myself so powerful would come back and hit me. So then I'd be like, well, gotta get rid of this so nobody else acquires what I've got.
This is so good. This is good. You guys are so advanced. Did you go and watch previous versions of this? Preparing for this? No, I'm going to come to this, back to
I
this,
think
Chris.
it would almost be like the movie Groundhog Day, or thinking about God and free will, and that I think initially we would probably be corrupt. But after we had absolute power, I think there would be something that would be so disappointing about that and so empty about that, that at some point we would then start to do good or allow people to have free will and all these different kinds of things.
Very good.
I think as we talk about this, it seems like corruption is a very relative term, and doing good is a very relative term. So for instance, I forget who said it, someone said they would fix the election. Perhaps that's their version of doing good. Or if you killed an enemy. I mean, there's murder essentially in war today, but it's deemed good for one reason and not for another. So it comes down to the fact that one person can decide what's good and bad versus society deciding what's good and bad for everyone.
Okay, you all are getting someplace fast. This is really good because here's what I do with slower groups that don't catch on real fast or are very reluctant to play the game. But I always sort of spring a little trap on them after they get going and they say, oh, we do this, rob banks, some awful things in some of these groups. I kid you not. I say, okay, that's what you would do, and I believe you. That's very credible, actually. But what do you do if it is your enemy who gets the ring? Now it's no longer an exercise in egoism or egotism, but it's an exercise in a social compact or a contract of some sort. And I say, what protects you if somebody else gets the ring? Well, Brett, you said nothing?
Well, if
Technically,
somebody has
you're
a
right.
ring where they can turn invisible, you have no idea if they're there or not. I mean, if you know they have the ring, then you sort of become more careful about what you do because you don't know if your enemies are in your room,
Right.
or in the room with you. So if you know they're there, you're kind of careful of what you say about that person. But if you don't know that somebody has a ring that turns themselves invisible, then there's really nothing you can change.
Although I think several of you have said, you're absolutely right. Technically, you're up that creek without a paddle. Yes.
Your integrity protects you.
Did that protect good Jewish men and women in the Third Reich? Did it protect good Russians in the Soviet era? I'm not sure integrity actually preserves your life. I'm going to challenge that, Jordan.
Okay.
But talk back.
Well, my thought went to if you're behaving like you would to your values and you were following that kind of loosely outlined path up there, that hopefully no one would have any reason to harm you or do anything wrong against you. And that if they were in the room and you couldn't see them, but you were acting ethically and honestly and, building trust with others around you, that hopefully they wouldn't harm you.
I think a lot of us do respond to that. I'm not sure the most powerful person who's been corrupted would, but it's certainly a stance that we should take in our own conscience, to make sure we have a clear and informed conscience. And I like that, absolutely. Michael.
I think our own sense of integrity gives us the meaning of the life that we should desire. And even Socrates was willing to forsake his own life for his principles, and he decided that, this is not as important as some of these, timeless eternal truths, and I think that is what we should be striving for. And he was a huge man, but at least he sets an example for what we should strive for.
You're absolutely right. I mean, for those of us who do not have the ring, that is the principled and right thing to do, to be sure. What Chris was driving at is also very interesting, though, because there's one thing that this most powerful person in the world does not have, and that's love. Because everyone fears. And it follows from that that this individual does not have community. He does not have those bonds of affection that humanize us and that keep us grounded so that we can function day to day without going into a deep depression. Without that, this person becomes, after a while, powerless. Because that powerful person is going to understand that no one does what he wants to do out of love and respect and friendship and community and a sense of common betterment. No one. And I would argue that those are the values that drive us and people who aspire to be leaders into community to do better. I think, and I didn't think of this actually, it was in like the third or fourth time I did this with a group, and this woman articulated it so well. She said, we've got power. We've got power to bargain with this dude. If you throw that ring away, we will love you and we will respect you beyond what you ever imagined you could have, because we will know what you overcame to throw that ring away. And you will have shown that you have a strength that is worthy of our respect, our affection, our love, and your being in our community. And then it occurred to me, this was George Washington. Remember how I began with Washington? Most charismatic guy in any room, always recognized as the leader before he even had to do anything. Washington is the one president we've had where the evidence is so strong, you can say he's the one president who walked away from power again and again and again. And that's why we've adopted him as the father of our country. This is why we love Washington. This is why we have a holiday devoted to him, even though he's just a marble statue out there. But he walked away from power and turned in his commission to the Confederated Congress. At the end of the Constitutional Convention, he stepped down to let the states decide. After the first term as president, he was willing to step aside. After the second term as president, he said, let me be, like the Roman Cincinnatus, let me just go back to my farm. I'm a man ultimately of peace, and I wish no harm. I don't need the power. And yet he's the man we want to have the power. So Gaiji's story links in actually with your own personal experience and our experience as Americans. We learn a lot about ourselves when we take a little inventory and we really get real about who we are. And we know how corrupted we can become, every one of us, I would submit. And then we look at the possibilities of hope that we see in somebody like a Washington. And I just think that that's really inspiring for us to keep in mind. And, you know, I would submit that if you are that kind of person who has done that inventory and has reflected on power and what you would be with it, and then realizing that you have to reground yourself in community and the affection of that community, that is transformative. That's where I think leaders can talk to each other internationally, because we're all basically that same DNA. We're all programmed to need that. Let me end on one little statement about Washington. When King George III, the other George, heard that Washington had renounced power so many times, George III on his throne in his palace, he said, if that is true, or as he put it, if that be true, if that's true, then George Washington is surely the greatest man of this generation, and perhaps the greatest man who's ever lived. There's hope for us, because we have him as an American who we've adopted as the father of our country. Well, thank you very much.
All right, well, thanks for the introduction, Gleaves. My name is Ann Hartley, and as Gleaves was saying, I spent last semester studying in Sevilla, Spain, or in English, Seville. I think Sevilla sounds prettier. I spent January through May 10th in Sevilla studying Spanish and the language and the culture. And I decided 2 weeks before my flight was going to go back to America that I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go back to the States, and I felt a need to travel Europe. So after talking with my parents and telling them that I was going to travel with all these people and it was going to be great, I decided to travel alone for 45 days around Europe. I had some travel partners here and there, and ended up having a travel partner for the last week, which was great. But it was really a growing experience, one that I wasn't sure what would happen. You know, I had never traveled outside the U.S. besides hiking in Canada for a little bit, but it was a new thing. But I'm going to tell you about one story. It was a bus ride. I was in Paris, and it was May 17th, a Thursday evening, and loaded this bus and was going to Ghent, Belgium. And I had never been to Belgium. I had never taken a bus in Europe across country lines. And I was just sitting there journaling, had a pen in one hand, a journal on my lap, a cookie in the other hand, and some guy behind me was talking on his cell phone in a language I couldn't pinpoint what it was. And then when he was done with his conversation behind me, like a half hour later, he was peering over, what you doing? Didn't say anything. And I turned around, hello, I didn't know what to say, hello, hola. I don't know. I know English and Spanish, and that's it. And I didn't know, okay, hi, how are you? And he said, where are you from? I said, oh, wow, like his English is pretty good. Like, I don't know, where is he from? And I said, oh, I'm from America. And he said, oh, you don't like us. Your government hates us. Okay, nice to meet you too. My name's Anne. And, okay, so let's have a conversation. So we slowly started talking, and I found myself in this odd position where I had to give a bus speech for my country. Like, this isn't the elevator speech that we talk about here in the Cook Leadership Academy and in our professional lives. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. And the pressure really, I really felt the pressure when he said, and you're the first American that I've ever met. Okay, not sure if I totally believe you, but okay, so this is more pressure, and I'm not prepared for this. I study psychology and Spanish, and yes, I watch the news, and when homework allows, I'll read the newspaper and really delve deep into the issues, but okay, all right, I'll do the best I can, and we'll go from there. But the hardest part was when I felt like a peacekeeper between what I grew up with and what I believed and his reality in Iraq. His name is Saeed. He is an Iraqi, and he's living in Brussels. And while he's living in Brussels, he's working for a social service agency, where he's helping Iraqis come over to Brussels. And it was just a really interesting experience hearing him say, well, your actions are telling me that you hate us, because those bombs that you say are going to go kill the bad people are killing my family and friends. Like, why is that? Like, your actions do not say that you love us, that you really want to create peace. So tell me about that. And I couldn't give him a firm answer and totally convince him that as Americans, we really do want the best. Like, we are an ally. We want to help you live fulfilling lives without the suppression from different terrorist groups and that type of thing. And it was just a really, really interesting experience. But when Saeed was breaking into my bubble, I just felt I was really jarred. well, what do I do? And then now that I'm thinking about it, and as I was journaling for the rest of my month and a half, Saeed really did have a big impact on me. Like, he broke my bubble. He broke my protective film that surround me, that kind of numbs me from a lot of emotions and a lot of experiences. And he just dug right in. He took a huge risk and saw an opportunity and seized it. He's like, I see this girl, she is just sitting in front of me, she's not doing anything, she's just journaling. I'm going to tell her how much I hate America. Great, thanks. I'm glad I can do that, Saeed. So, you know, he really did take a risk, and he was hungry for something. He was hungry for a conversation. And I also saw him as kind of a mentor. He really encouraged me to look outside of what meets the surface when I'm traveling and when I'm meeting new people. How do we dig deep? How do we get to know someone, and can that interaction propel us to another one that will eventually create this societal change? And when I'm thinking of societal change, one of the first things that comes to my mind is the Grand Valley mission statement: educating students to shape their lives, their professions, and their societies. That's huge. Like, that's, I really didn't realize how big that was. But as a Grand Valley community and a Grand Rapids community, and as people, as Americans, like, we really do shape each other in every interaction that we have. So over the course of this talk, I'll talk about taking risks, trusting your gut, being hungry, and having a mentor. So this taking risks thing is hard. It's hard for me, and I think it's hard for a lot of us, where we throw ourselves into a vulnerable position. You know, I didn't know if I wanted to travel after my study abroad period. And I was trying to tell myself, no, Anne, you need to go and get an internship and just get right into that professional world, and your whole life will be planned out, and okay, so you'll graduate in December, and I'm planning all these things in my mind, and like, I like to be organized and I like to have everything planned, and I realized that, you know, life doesn't come with a plan. Yes, I've heard that before, but I didn't learn to accept it and be okay with that. And learning to be okay with that was a huge risk for me, and just going and traveling without an itinerary, without having a place to stay that night, and searching around for a hostel at 10:30 at night. Not the safest thing in the world, but I mean, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And like, that's a risk, but we can take these risks every day, whether it's going to your favorite restaurant and ordering something different on the menu, or if it's talking with someone and saying, hey John, how are you? And you say, oh, having the case of the Mondays. Well, let's talk about that. Let's dig deeper, and let's go and have those conversations that are hard to have, that put us in that position where we're really vulnerable to their negativity, or to that story about last week, well, I was at the grocery store, and like, we have to make ourselves vulnerable to those types of interactions, because that's where we can grow the most. And I think as Cook Leadership Academy fellows, we can take Grand Valley's mission statement to another level and just say, you know, we'll propel ourselves into an area outside of Grand Valley. And it was really interesting, I was talking with Jordan earlier, and he said, so what's new? What's going on outside of the Grand Valley bubble? Yeah, you know, how do we branch out of our own area and experience life outside? And I think that's what Grand Valley wants to do. We want to propel people outside of their tight-knit community and expose each other to situations that are a little uncomfortable. And my second point is mentoring. Mentors are huge. Obviously, here at the Hauenstein Center and with the Cook Leadership Academy, you know, we have a strong foundation with mentoring, and I'm very thankful for the mentors that I've had, especially Deb back there. mentors are teachers, they're role models, they are the people that we look up to, and they influence us to be better people, to take those risks, and support us as we take on those risks. And going back to that connection and that conversation is huge when we can get past that small talk. I mean, Saeed, when he wanted to talk to me after he told me that he hated Americans, he said, "Hey, do you want a candy bar? Do you want this Kinder Bueno bar?" Which they're my favorite candy bars. And I just felt like, no, I have this cookie in my hand. I really don't need that chocolate bar. But it was a conversation starter for him. Here's the chocolate bar. Okay, thanks. I don't need that. But he said, "You look hungry." I said, "I'm not hungry. Like, I have a cookie in my hand. You should look in my backpack. I have probably 3 days worth of food because I'm always eating, and I get really nervous if I don't have a whole bunch of food on my back." And obviously he couldn't see in my backpack, or maybe he did when I was pulling out my journal. But still, oh my gosh, I mean, I don't know what that says about me. But yeah, he was starting that conversation, and that was huge. That was huge. And because of that, when I'm looking at my interactions with others, I'm searching to dig deeper. And he really was one of the first people that really jarred my bubble enough to make me realize, okay, I do need people around me that will continue to force me outside of that bubble. So mentors force us there, and they keep us accountable for our actions. And my third point is trusting your gut. So when Saeed was telling me about his family and about his experience and how there are these bombs that are hurting his family and friends, I thought, when do we draw the line? Politically, internationally, whatever, but then also in our personal lives. A lot of us are in college, and a lot of the mentors are in professional lives. Where do we draw that line between something, a corporation's agenda, a university's agenda, maybe a different friend's agenda or someone else's, and say, that's not in line with what I believe, or that's gone too far. And I think that's really important for us to think about. I know I'm wrestling with that right now, of trying to figure out my mission and what am I willing to sacrifice and what am I not willing to sacrifice, and staying true to that. So sometimes that means being a peacekeeper in an organization or in a job where we recognize that there's a difference, and we're kind of an RA. I was an RA for 2.5 years, and so I love those roommate mediations where you're just thinking, oh wow, I mean, that is kind of crazy, but and recognizing, okay, I don't really want to go there, but you have to find those commonalities and find where your mission and your purpose and your own personal agenda, if you will, align with others, and you need to come up with those things, those tangible ideas that you are not willing to sacrifice. And maybe that's trusting your gut instinct. As in growing up, we were always told, all right, on this multiple choice exam, make sure you trust your gut. Go with what you first thought. Okay, but my mind's telling me it could be D, it could be B, but I first thought it was C, it might be A. We really have to trust our gut, because our gut is going to tell us what is right, what do we really feel, so we can decrease that dissonance. And my fourth point is just being hungry. We have to be hungry in order to grow. We have to be hungry for personal growth. And I'm not saying we always need to be taking huge risks every day and going and changing the world in these ginormous ways. Every day, little, we need to remind ourselves, or we need to think deep inside ourselves and find out when are we hungry and how are we fed? And for me, I'm fed through conversation and genuine, authentic conversations where we really get to know each other on a deep personal level. I mean, yes, I'm fed physically by eating, and I love eating. But when Saeed was saying, "You look hungry," you know, he knew that I wasn't physically hungry. He saw my food, but you know, maybe he saw something else. Maybe he saw that I was hungry in the spiritual sense, in any other sense, you know, where I just needed that personal connection. I had spent a week by myself traveling, meeting up with a couple of friends here and there, but I was by myself and I had a lot of time to think, and I just needed someone to have a deep conversation with, someone that was going to rupture my bubble and just burst it and just say, hey, all right, you've got to think about this. You have to keep your options open. And that was huge. So my challenge to us as leadership fellows is to find out, or is to acknowledge when we are hungry and find out how we can feed ourselves and how we as a group, as the Cook Leadership Academy, can help feed each other. Because we really do, we have so many options, we have so many resources here where, you know, although we might not be in the same field, someone might be in the medical field and someone might be an accountant. We have so many commonalities, and it's imperative that we acknowledge those and use them, and we use each other to build each other up, to be better people. And if we just change Grand Valley's mission statement just for the purpose of this talk for a minute, if we change educating students to shape their lives and professions and their societies to mentoring students to shape their lives and professions and their societies, we're all students, no matter if we are at Grand Valley, at Davenport, or at another school, or if we are professionals. I mean, look at Ralph Hauenstein. He comes to all the Wheelhouse talks. He's still learning. He's still looking for something. He's learning. He's searching to learn, and we can do that through mentorship. So yeah, my challenge is to seek out a mentor and find someone that will help you take those risks, and find someone that can help keep you accountable to follow your gut and always be hungry and look to be fed. So that's my challenge to all of you.
Alright, well, before I begin, I'd like to thank Tori, Gleaves, Adam, and everyone else who worked to set this up. I think they put in a lot of effort and work, and they deserve to be thanked. And it's going to be tough to follow you, but, but I'll try my best. As a child, the most anticipated moment of my school career would be my summer vacation. In elementary school, I would look forward to summer vacation, not just for getting off of classes, but because every year we would travel to Jordan, where my parents are from originally. And in Jordan was my family, and you know, despite the archaeology, the history, and the culture of Jordan, the real reason that I wanted to go home is because my grandmother was there. And as an only child, and being the oldest grandchild, I was the most spoiled child. And being, you know, I was spoiled, and I'll admit I loved it. I loved every moment of it. And during one of these visits in the summer leading up to my third year of elementary school, so I just finished second grade, I noticed something odd and strange about my grandma. Usually we would play, she would take me out and show me off to her friends and the perks. But this year there was something strange. There was something weird about my grandmother. She wasn't herself. She was ill. But as a second grader, I look back and I think, what is ill to a second grader? Is it a cold? I mean, is it a flu? Nothing that can be solved by a trip to the doctor. Nothing that can be solved with a, you know, a NyQuil pill or something of that nature. But there was a particular encounter with my grandmother during our stay that was especially strange. I knew that my grandmother loved me, and she didn't need to tell me that she loved me, but there was this, you know, a morning during, I think it was the first week of our visit, in which my grandmother was awake early, and so was I, because I hadn't adjusted to the 7-hour time difference yet. And I went up to her bedside, I brought a deck of cards, and we started playing together. Midway through our game, she stopped, she looked at me, and she held my hand and said that she loved me. Well, I didn't need to be told that she loved me. I know you love me, of course, you're my grandmother. So that was especially strange. In that moment, I'm gonna relate to later on to the talk. So, someone as spoiled as me didn't need to be told that I was loved. So that was a little bit strange. Later on in that day, the same day that we played the deck of cards, I was playing with my cousins. And my cousins took me out to the park. And they were older than I, and they could drive. Amidst our games, amidst our fun, we were interrupted by a phone call from my father, who called one of my cousins, telling him that we need to come to the hospital immediately. And to me, that was just an interruption of my fun. I want to go to the hospital, okay, fine, let's go. But really, my grandmother was feeling very ill to the point that she needed to be taken to the hospital. So we got into the car, we left our playtime, and we went into the hospital. When we reached the hospital, we were escorted by my grandfather's friends, and I'll explain the sarcasm behind friends later on in the talk. We were escorted by my grandfather's friends to a private floor in the hospital, and we were in the waiting room, waiting for the doctor's diagnosis of what my grandmother had. I grew, as a child, I grew extremely bored, so I ventured off from the waiting room to play. And I came across an elevator, a button-filled, elevator. That was the joy in heaven of every second grader. So I was playing with the elevator, and one thing led to another, and I was on the first floor. I was on the main building, or inside of the first floor in the main building, the emergency area. And that's when things got strange. I was greeted with images of pain, of images of shock, people carrying their children, fathers carrying their children, mothers carrying their children in pain. And as a second grader, that was shocking to me. I've never seen something like that. As a second grader growing up here, I've never been exposed to something like that. All of these people were in a critical condition, and they were people of different ages, from infants all the way up to older than my grandparents. And this scene froze me. They were pleading for assistance. They were pleading for help from the hospital administration, who were refusing them treatment. And I've never seen anything like that. I've lived my entire life in the United States. Anytime you need treatment, whether you have money or not, you get treatment. But in Jordan, it was a little bit different. They were being refused treatment, and the scene of helplessness, the scene of seeing them in pain, the scene of this shock that it caused me, was in fact a huge reason, a contributing factor into my current passion for medicine and my current want to be a doctor, and just to alleviate that helplessness from people. And this shock and awe overtook me, and it froze me. And so I stood still in front of the elevator. I was still standing in front of the elevator, I hadn't moved. I stood still until I felt a sharp tug on my back. That was my uncle, who, along with the rest of my family, were looking for me throughout the entire hospital. So as my shock resolved, as he was taking me back to my family, I was questioning him, and I was questioning them. I was asking, why are those people in that condition? Why are they being refused treatment? But more importantly, why were we being given preferential treatment over them? What was that disconnect there? So, in order to explain that, and what it was that I couldn't understand at that moment, was the fact that in Jordan, there was much pull attained from being well connected. And favoritism is granted to friends and families of those in power and those that are working in the government. My grandfather, after working his entire life in the intelligence community of Jordan, had had established these connections that earned us these rights or these privileges that we have. And this nepotism is what granted us access to a private floor in a hospital that no one else had access to. And this nepotism is what caused my grandmother to receive this expedited treatment in the hospital. So as for those who were being refused treatment, it wasn't because they did something wrong, it wasn't because they were bad people, but it was because they didn't have the money, they didn't have the connections to get that treatment. So, and in Jordan, if you don't have the money to pay for your treatment up front, you don't get treatment. And that's the reason for the scenes of shock and all that I saw. But unfortunately, my grandmother passed away shortly afterwards. But I think to myself how much I love my grandmother. And I think to myself that scene of playing with, with the deck of cards with my grandmother. And the scene of her telling me that she loved me. But then, what my second grade personality failed to acknowledge was the more important question. What about those people that I saw there? What about those grandchildren that lost their grandmothers that day? Or the children that lost their parents? Or the parents that lost their children that day in the hospital, in the waiting room, or in the emergency area? So as I was approached to give this speech, I had no idea what I was going to speak about. Was it, the culture that I come from? My passion for science and medicine? Or was it, the aspirations that I had, the experiences that I had? I had no idea where to start. I had no idea what to do. But as I thought more about it, one thing that led me my entire life, and one thing that I had access to, and we all have the experience, is in fact access. We have that access, and we all share that access. From my youth, I was always encouraged to pursue a career in medicine. And some might say that I was pressured to pursue a career in medicine. So though my passion for medicine supersedes and exceeds all the pressure that my family put on me, I was always had that pressure of being the first doctor in my family. And now I understand why I was pressured. Now I understand why my parents urged me to become a doctor. And they worked tirelessly to give me opportunities, and to give me chances, to give me access to things that they've never had, to things that others have never had in their situation and in my situation. So as I see it now, this upbringing and these opportunities and this access that my parents gave me was less of a right, less of a privilege, more than it was a responsibility. So as I reflect back onto that moment in which I entered the elevator, it became more apparent to me that the elevator was much more than a button-filled play toy. Rather, the elevator was a representation of the disconnect between 1 and 2, between the different levels that we saw. So the elevator showed me the disparity between each floor. We were on the private floor, they were on the main floor. It was a representation of the boundaries disconnecting the top from the bottom. So the breaking of these boundaries, the connecting of the disconnect, is leadership. And we use the access that we have to break the barriers between 1 and 2. And this, in fact, levels the playing field. So we each come from diverse backgrounds, and we all have a wide range of experiences. But we all share one thing. We all have access. And that's evident here today. We all are associated or affiliated with Cook Leadership Academy in one way. And whether it's the material goods education, or inspiration, which is what we have today, we all have access. And in Cook Leadership Academy, we're all here today because of our affiliation with Cook Leadership and Hauenstein Center. But as fellows, we are a small handful of people being granted access to a plethora of resources, mentors, and things that will assist us in our quest to be excellent leaders in our futures. So this then becomes an obligation on us to exhaust all resources that we have and to share these resources through our actions to those who don't have it. And this is leadership. Giving access to those who can't have it. And the way that I was planning on doing it is through medicine. I was wanting to go back into the hospital area, give access to medicine to those who can't afford it, to those who don't have it. And whether it's in areas of international business, areas in politics, in any stance that you take, being able to transfer or share that access that you have, the quality education that we have here in Grand Valley, and give it to others is what makes a leader a quality leader. And if you look at the example of the world village, so if the entire population of the globe was condensed to a village of 100 people, one person in that village would have a college education. We all have a college education. We're all getting a college education. We all have access and privilege by getting a college education. So then the responsibility is on us, just in that one instance, to share what we have, to pass on the knowledge that we earned and that we gained to others. So as leaders, we are constantly scanning for new possibilities or alternative ways of looking at something. So when I came out of that elevator, the scene that I saw shocked me at first, but I'm thankful that I witnessed that scene. I'm thankful that I was able to go down the elevator and go down the floors, the socioeconomic floors, to witness things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, things that would transform the way that I think. And I urge myself, and I urge you, to question the normal. I didn't accept what my uncles and what my parents told me, that it was normal for us to be this way, that it was normal for us to receive this privileged treatment, because it wasn't normal. So question the normal. As leaders, we have to do this, and we have to question the normal, and believe that that all of us are capable of changing the way that things are done. And our experience in the Hauenstein Center, our experience with the mentors, and all the resources that we have here will aid us in doing so. It will aid us in challenging the status quo, in challenging the thoughts, the norms, and the wrongs of society. So we all have that power within us to do it. And thank you.